What a child experiences in the first 3 years of life is critical to their brain development and success. Yet early educators are severely underpaid and childcare is unaffordable for many families. It's time to invest in our children, in families, in our communities. A common start is a stronger future.
Everyone can be a part, Give us a common start, Equal opportunities for all communities. We need more. Give the children wings to soar. Broken dreams, let's restore. I'm down and out. I'm not looking for a handout, but I can't make it without a little help. I wanna take the next step, help my family build wealth, but I can't afford childcare. Feels like too much.
Wanna make a difference, I'm hoping to make a change. Sometimes I feel overworked and I'm knowing I'm underpaid, but working hard don't compare to the smiles up on their face. See that they growing happy and smarter like every day, but some people see me as a glorified babysitter, like I'm working 3 jobs just so I can play with them. We teach them lessons that they need for every day with them. Learn their first steps, their first words, and potty train with them. These are the most important years of their life. I don't do it for the money, I just do it cause it's right. But I can't afford my rent, I gotta shut off all my lights. And the college that is knocking, so I can't give up the fight. Equal opportunity, knowledge is what I stand for. Giving up my passion is something I never planned for. Something's gotta give, we just ask for a little help, because children are the future, they can't do it by themselves.
Everyone can be a part, Give us a common start, Equal opportunities for all communities. We need more. Give the children wings to soar. Broken dreams, let's restore.
This is for every child, family, provider, early educator, employer, and community member. A common start is a stronger future.
Hi, welcome. This is the Common Start Roundtable. Thank you for all of your comments in chat. I would definitely like to say that we can get started in just a moment. For our audience, I would like to say to please remain on mute. Chat will be monitored and will include audience questions from the chat as time permits. And I would also like to say that this meeting is being recorded. So tonight we do have interpretation services, and we have Reed who will be explaining that to us.
Good evening all. I am with Excel Linguistics. I'm the interpretation team tonight. We do have interpretation for English and Spanish. In just a moment, we'll turn this on and everyone will see a globe icon right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When you see this icon, you can click on it and select your language. We ask whether you speak English or Spanish. Take a moment to find this button when it appears and choose your preferred language. I'll also add that if you've joined from a mobile phone or a tablet, you'll need to click on the 3 dots button right next to the word more, and from there you'll see the language interpretation option. Now I'll turn it over to Stephanie to make that announcement in Spanish.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a todos. El día de hoy tenemos la interpretación disponible en español. En unos momentos, en la parte baja de su pantalla, va a haber un icono de un globo con la palabra interpretación. Desde ahí van a poder escoger el lenguaje en el cual quieren escuchar esta reunión. Si están conectados desde la aplicación, desde su celular, desde un iPad, una tablet, tiene que darle clic al botón de los 3 puntos para buscar más opciones y encontrar la palabra interpretación. Desde ahí pueden seleccionar el lenguaje. Les pedimos que independientemente si hablan inglés o español, que seleccionen uno de los canales y se queden en este por la duración de la llamada. Gracias.
Thank you so much,
Right.
Stephanie. And now everyone should be able to see that globe on their screen to choose your language. Gracias, Stephanie. Ahora todo el mundo debe poder ver ese icono de un globo en su pantalla de Zoom. All right, and over to you, Ana.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much, Reed. And thank you to our interpreter team for being here this evening to assist with this meeting. So I wanted to say welcome to everybody in our audience. I'm Anna Houston, the Grassroots Coordinator for Common Start, which is a project of the Coalition for Social Justice. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. As speakers and in the audience, we're so happy that you can make time to be with us. So the goal of this roundtable is to discuss how the Common Start legislation supports families, early education and childcare providers, and early educators. And I'd like to just go over our agenda for this evening so everybody has a sense of what we'll be covering. So for our roundtable this evening, we are going to have an update on what's going on currently in Massachusetts. We will then talk about Common Start and provide an overview, and then we will begin our roundtable discussion. We do have a special guest speaker with us this evening. Assistant Secretary Katherine Clark will join us sometime after 7. And then we also have a call to action. So this is what we're going to be covering this evening. And again, thank you so much for being here. So, a little too soon. We can get rid of that. So I'd like to introduce our roundtable speakers. They will then provide a greater introduction as they get ready to talk. But we have parents with us this evening that include Andrew Small, Enelida Benjamin, Shane Dunn, and Elizabeth Bernardi. We have educators Roz Mann and Patricia Nadeau. And we have providers Sally Mavrides and Lauren Cook. And we have Naomi Meyer and Colin Jones with us. So as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the many struggles and incredible stress that parents and early education and childcare community members face on a daily basis. The Common Start Coalition stands with you in solidarity that this must change. And that's why we're here tonight. So our first speaker is Colin, Colin Jones, excuse me, is a senior policy analyst at the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center, focusing on early and K-12 education policy and finance. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. What I want to start with is a little bit of just a background of how I look at this as a budget watcher and analyst, and a little bit of the picture and the context in which all of the great work that's going on at the Common Start is going to land. And I've also come at this as a parent. So my son was 2 when the pandemic hit, and I've experienced it directly, trying to work remotely and manage it all. So I'm going to say a little bit, and then we'll keep moving with the panel. So I'll get the slides going now. So a couple things just about the context and the opportunities in front of us right now. So one of the biggest things we have to keep our eye on right now is the fact that due to the multiple COVID relief bills, we actually have a significant amount of federal funding that's in our hands right now in order to address some of these challenges and kind of get this kickstarted. So it hasn't been as much funding from the federal government for childcare compared to K-12, but it's really significant, and there's potentially more opportunities, which I'm excited to hear about later from Congresswoman Clark, what the update from DC might be. But in total, it's been since the beginning of the pandemic, we had nearly $730 million in federal support for early education. Most of it was used to stabilize the field, and some of it is used to sort of for block grants and for subsidized care. So that's been really significant. The amount of funding that we've been able to have has grown over time. So there's been about 6 COVID relief bills since March 2020. And as it went on, the amount of funding for early ed has really gone up, where it was only about 50 million in the first bill back in March 2020, but it's gone all the way up to nearly 540 million in the American Rescue Plan. And so what that has allowed us to do, and has allowed the state and the Department of Early Ed to do, is not just support the existing programs that existed in trying to patch those up, but really do more to give funding across the field. So when you get to the American Rescue Plan, you can start to, the department has been able to build new programs that increase capacity and support the entire early ed field, not just whoever was getting subsidies before. And that's really important because that's the direction we hope to go, I believe, with Common Start as well. So as critical and important as that is, there are limitations to that I think are important to mention. So, just in the first 3 months of the pandemic when childcare was shut down, the data showed that we had lost about $750 million. Providers had lost that amount in tuition, and we still have much tougher conditions. And I hope that I'm sure the providers here tonight will say more about this, but it is just much more difficult to operate in these conditions. And so there has been some learning as we go. And I would say from the state perspective, there's been some innovation and improvement as they invented new programs. They kind of had to, right? Because unlike for K-12 schools, there wasn't really a robust way that the federal government just funds childcare like there is in K through 12 education. So the department was getting more money, it was innovating and trying some things that have been really successful, but it's still not necessarily at the same scale of the challenges we face. And the other big point to remember is that this is going to expire at some point. So all the COVID relief grants, a year or two from now, that's going to be it for that particular pot of money. Now we hope there's another one coming with an infrastructure bill that covers childcare, but that's not something we can count on quite yet. So the federal grants that we have right now can be a bridge, but they're not going to be a substitute for sustained state and federal support. So in terms of what the early ed budget looks like right now, this is just a quick snapshot, and it's gone up significantly in the past 2 years. So pre-pandemic, we were only about $700 million in total state support in the state budget for early education, but now we are at nearly 1.6 billion, and that a lot of that, the yellow bar here, about 640 million. That is right now the federal COVID relief money that is really bringing this budget up to a much higher level than it had been in recent years. Now that's really exciting, but it's also, as I mentioned, that money will expire. So although we see it going in the right direction, so greater state funding for early ed, as we've dealt with the COVID disruptions and the crisis, a lot of that right now is going to be this one time or money that's going to be with us for a couple of years. And what we don't want is that to just fall off the edge of the cliff when that money expires. So it's exciting to have it now, but we got to plan for the future. So a few things just from what's going on in the field right now. A couple of things to highlight. Again, this is just the context in which this coalition and the work continues. So family fees for families who participated in subsidized care have been pretty much waived throughout the entire pandemic. But what's going to happen is starting next month, the department is going to start to begin to have family fees again, but it's going to be exempting low-income families, and it's going to be really bringing that burden on families down to from about 10% of income was about the average before. It's under the new schedule. They're making the case it's only be 2.5%, and that gets at that's the goal in line with Common Start of making sure that no family is paying more than 7%, and we're making it exempt for a low-income family. So it's going to be really important. As I mentioned, there is a significant take-up across the early ed field of the stabilization program. So about 80% of providers who are eligible are getting, thanks to ARPA, are getting stabilization grants. And more of those are going to low-income communities in gateway cities and family childcare. And the plan is to extend that program for the full year. But again, this all depends on temporary money that won't necessarily be available going forward unless we manage to do that as a coalition, as a field. So there's a lot of challenges left too. We got to increase pay. We got to deal with workforce shortages and increase the number of kids we can serve. So as far as the most recent data that the state put out there, 11% of the pre-COVID EDC programs that existed across the state, and that's hundreds of programs, had closed, and staffing levels are only at 85% of what was needed based on the data from the Department of Early Ed. So I don't want to. So I'll stop there and I'll say, this is, we have a lot of opportunities in front of us. We also have a lot of challenges, and we've got to kind of get those things together. And that's what I'm excited to continue talking with you all tonight. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Colin. Really appreciate that state update. So Before we lean into the Common Start bill, we have a quick word cloud question for everyone that includes everybody who is a speaker and everybody in the audience. So here's your question that's going to be coming up here on the screen in a moment. In an application called Menti. So in one word, how are you feeling about what's happening to the early education and childcare community? And so
I just put in the chat box a link where you can actually go and fill out this question, or you can go to Menti and type in the code that you see on the screen up there, or I'll put it in the chat for you. It is 78073217. So as people fill out the question and as people answer it, we'll start to see the word cloud show up. I'll put the link to the Menti question again.
all right, so let's go ahead and see if we can stop right there. I see the word hopeful. That's really pretty awesome, given the fact that everybody has been so stressed, but seeing that hopeful is the number one feeling that everybody has right now is just absolutely terrific. Recognizing, of course, that we are also very frustrated and concerned and stressed and exhausted and worried. So thank you everyone for participating. We'll be sure to share that information as we move forward in our advocacy for Common Start. So I wanted to share a little bit about the origins of Common Start. It became a project of the Coalition for Social Justice after CSJ had success working on the paid family and medical leave campaign. So some of the folks, some of the advocates and parents and healthcare folks that were a part of that particular group, along with so many others, got together afterward and really determined that this would be the next campaign that they would want to work on together. So here we are today with a coalition of hundreds of statewide members, as well as hundreds of local chapter members who want to make Common Start a reality. So Common Start works through 6 local chapters across Massachusetts. And I'd like to give a shout out to my coordinator peers and action team members who make all of this happen. We are wearing our Common Start t-shirts. So if you see us out in the audience, you know that we are part of Common Start work team or volunteers. So we have Carissa and Vanessa in Greater Boston, Sandy and Janae in the Cape and Islands, Kathy and Lamari in Southeast Mass, Liz and Marissa Bella in Central Mass, and Janae and Devin in Western Mass, and I'm the coordinator for Northeast Mass. So I would like to say, if you like what you hear tonight, please join one of your local chapters. We'll put the link in the chat, and you too can add your voice to what we're doing here in the Common Start Coalition. So now to share the intentions, uniqueness, and status of the Common Start bill is Naomi Meyer. Naomi is a senior attorney in the Welfare Law Unit at Greater Boston Legal Services, where she has worked since 2002. She represents very low income families in cash welfare, food stamps, SNAP, and subsidized childcare cases, and engages in systemic advocacy to improve these programs throughout Massachusetts. She is a member of the Common Start Coalition Steering Committee, and she helped draft the bill. Naomi?
Thank you, Anna. It's really nice to be here with you all, even if it's remote. And just talk a little bit about, what the intention behind this bill was with the group that the Coalition for Social Justice brought together before we even had the Common Start name. You know, many folks on this Zoom for sure, spent a long time, close to 2 years, discussing all that was needed to try to fix childcare. This was before the pandemic, but to fix all the issues that we were seeing in childcare, what those issues were, and how we could address them. Certainly many folks, especially childcare providers, have already been advocating for years and years and years for, better payment rates from the state if they accept subsidies and, all sorts of other things. But what's new, I guess, and I think unique about this, the Common Start effort, was to bring together all these different voices, providers, and educators and parents, to figure out how we could rethink, come up with a framework for how a system would work for everybody. Because, we recognized you can't just, for example, increase income eligibility for subsidies without also doing something to ensure that there are enough providers who are able to enter and stay in the business to serve all those families. And you can't just increase educator salaries, which we know is so important, but you can't just do that without also figuring out, well, if it costs more to provide care, how are families going to afford that care? So what we sought to do with this bill was to piece together affordability for families, compensation for the true cost of care for providers, decent and fair salaries for educators, and put all those pieces together. And we're going to get, as we proceed with the roundtable, we're going to get into more of the details about that. But I think hopefully that's kind of a helpful summary of where we intended to go with this. And in terms of the status and the process, so the bill was heard by the Joint Committee on Education in November, and we are waiting for it to be reported out of that committee, which we hope will happen, so that we can continue the legislative process from there.
Yeah. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for that overview. So I would like to say that we have Senator Lewis with us this evening. So welcome, Senator. We really appreciate that you are here with us this evening. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. In closing this particular part, I wanted to say that as it relates to the Common Start bill, we've never seen a bill like this before, in the sense that it is so inclusive of all stakeholders and so comprehensive in all that it covers. So we all need to come together in order to make this happen, because it's going to take all of us. It's really united that's going to get a system change, because that is what's going to be lifting all of our boats. So let's continue this conversation. And next up, I would like to be able to start the roundtable discussion with our parents. And so Andrew, Nellie, Shane, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing your stories. If you each have a couple of minutes, and let's go ahead and start with Shane and Elizabeth. If you could please introduce yourselves and share your story about the top challenges you're facing with early education and childcare for your family.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Bernardi, and this is Shane Dunn. And we are the parents of a 2-year-old who is at an early learning center and a 4-year-old who transitioned this year to Boston Public Schools. Neither of us grew up here in Boston. We don't have grandparents nearby who can help with care. So for us, our childcare center has been an integral part of the community that we've built for ourselves here in Boston. And we live in the Roxbury neighborhood. And when we had our kids, we knew we really wanted to stay in Boston. We bought a house here, you know, we're sending our son to a BPS school. We really love the community, the diversity, and all the things that we can do. And so we knew when we were living in Boston and wanted to stay that childcare would be difficult to find. So we are now willing to tell people, I know my mother-in-law is on this right now, but we signed ourselves up for childcare before we ever told our families we were pregnant. We just knew how competitive it was and how long the wait lists were. So childcare centers knew before our families that we were expecting a child. And so, you know, our childcare center is Ellis Early Learning in the South End. And I know Lauren Cook, the CEO, is on this call as well. It's really just become such an important part of our lives since our older child was 4 months old. You know, we've been so lucky to find just an incredible network of educators who have been partners in raising our children, and other families who have just enriched our overall experience living here in Boston and become wonderful friends to us and to our kids.
Yeah, and Ellis, which again, you will likely hear a little bit more about later, is certainly special in that it's a nonprofit center with a unique model that brings together families, children from all racial, socioeconomic, and a range of backgrounds. And that truly means a lot to our family, and I expect to many folks on this call tonight. And it's just been special, as Elizabeth has said, and really reinforced the reason we wanted to stay in Boston. However, even as a nonprofit, it's still incredibly expensive for Ellis to do its work. And for us as parents who certainly come at this with some privilege as private pay families, it's still become incredibly expensive for us, and certainly more than 7% of our income, which is why we're certainly advocates for the Common Start bill. But it's also more than our mortgage. It certainly is the biggest line item of our budget as our kids are very young. And you know, we're grateful our son is now in a BPS school, but we still have one child at Ellis. And the pandemic certainly has not helped Ellis's bottom line, even though Ellis is doing everything it can, as are so many folks out there, either in in-home providers or larger centers like Ellis. So the business model, again, why we're here tonight is just to reinforce that the business model is not working for anyone. You know, as Elizabeth alluded to, we care deeply about everyone involved at Ellis and the childcare community, including our teachers, who have been second parents to or additional parents to our children, extended members of our family, and we can't say enough about them. And I think, you know, one of the things to reinforce again tonight is just how important it is to support them. So many of them are struggling in waves, and the society's left them behind. And we certainly hope coming out of this that folks will remember that they're the true heroes that the pandemic has kind of also left behind, unfortunately, who are taking care of our kids night and day since the beginning of the pandemic. So in closing, thank you to everyone for all that you do who are out there as childcare providers. Certainly thank you to our fellow parents for doing all you can to support your kids, and our teachers. But everyone's struggling, and that came out at the beginning of this presentation. No one is, you know, the early childhood sector is doing phenomenal work, but it's certainly a broken business model, and we really require public investment. And as Colin said, we need the investment to go beyond one-time funds from the federal and state governments. So I hope we will do all that we can to support parents and caregivers, providers, and then certainly the amazing teachers who take care of our kids every day. So it's an honor to be with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane and Elizabeth. Andrew, could you please introduce yourself and share your story about the top challenges you have?
No problem. Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Andrew Small. Myself, along with my beautiful wife, are the parents of two beautiful boys, one 7 and one due in February. So I've been through it and about to get right back into it. And unfortunately, unlike Elizabeth and Shane, if I could call you by your first name, I do apologize. I wasn't as prepared. We weren't as prepared. So the euphoria of it wore off pretty quickly once maternity leave started to come to a close, right? So the biggest challenge was, in fact, finding a well-known, quality, well-trusted place. Of course, the children are number one priority and our most important thing. So to find somebody that you trust with your child was very difficult. Once we did find a place, he did get quality care, but it eventually led to us moving. We did love where we lived, but unfortunately, that particular city only have a handful of programs. And when we had to think about drop off and pickup, it eventually led to us having to move. So yes, they're in school, but somebody has to be there to drop them off. Somebody has to be there to pick them up. So it eventually affected our job options. And we had to move, unfortunately. And yes, we happened to move to a nice neighborhood, and we had quality care. And while he was in program, unfortunately, my son was diagnosed with delayed speech. And the process of getting a counselor eventually proved itself to be a little bit difficult. It was a little bit tedious, again, filling out the paperwork, finding the companies that were responsible, getting here and there. But again, once he got the care done, you know, he got quality care, and of course we continued. And once my son transitioned out of kindergarten, I'd say pre-K, he was a unique because he's born in the latter part of the year in December. He found himself aged out of programs at age 4. So we weren't able to find any programs that were willing to accept them because he was 4. So for a year or so, we were stuck with no available programs. So again, for me, it was incredibly difficult finding a quality care. And once we found quality care, you know, the cost of it was astronomical, unlike what we expect. And like they mentioned, it's the biggest line item and on the budget. So of course, quality, affordable care is important. And my biggest learning point is to plan way ahead. So yes, baby number 2 isn't here, but I'm planning way in advance, because even when it comes on to summer programs for my older son, veteran parents know start in winter. But of course, for any new parent, there isn't like a bank of available quality care programs that could help us as a starting point. And it does depend on word of mouth to kind of continuously ask and kind of borrow and find out where these good programs are. So again, I've learned, and like most veteran parents we know, plan way ahead, make the programs know ahead, even before appearance that we're expecting. So that was my biggest challenge, of course. And thank you again for allowing us to speak. And I think what you guys are doing are great. And needless to say, thank you to our educators and all our providers, because again, we trust you with our most valuable possession, not to call them possessions, but our most valuable thing in life. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and congratulations. Annalisa Benjamin. So Annalisa, would you like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your situation?
Good evening. My name is Annalisa Benjamin. I'm a parent leader, as well as a wraparound coordinator for the Worcester Public Schools. My experience is not the same as everyone else. Understanding that high quality education is not accessible for all working parents. That was my case, even though I planned out with my husband at the moment, when we were going to have our child, I did have to leave my job because we knew that we were not going to be able to afford to have our child in a daycare or childcare of quality. It is very expensive, and it was not accessible for us. In our case, I had to stay home with my child, and then after that, I had another one. So I had to stay home with both of my kids. It is a privilege to stay home with your children, but for working parents, it's not the same thing as low-income families, which most of them have subsidized child care. For working parents, it's different because the bar is higher. We don't get that subsidized because the guidelines don't apply to us. And it's very frustrating that we have to leave our jobs and our careers for our children to afford a high quality education. And that was my case. Another case that I have that I see constantly in our schools is I have a coworker as well that she's been in the system for many years, but now she decided to work as a CNA worker. Now she's going to lose her subsidized for child care for her son. So that means that she has to make a decision. Either she stops working or lose the subsidized for a child care for her son. So my call is to close the gap. How can we close the gap for working parents to be able to afford a high quality early childhood care, and also for the families that are immigrants at this time? Thank you for your time.
Annalisa, thank you so much for sharing your story as well. And so I now invite Naomi to provide some context around the Common Start bill related to what we've just heard.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much to all the parents for talking about their experiences and sharing their stories. The Come Start bill seeks to address the needs of parents I would say broadly in two ways. One is by making more parents eligible for subsidies, as you just heard. Right now, if people earn just a bit more, they though they're still they still may be struggling, they might become ineligible. They might exceed the limits to receive a subsidy under existing rules. And so the Common Start bill would make middle and higher income families eligible. This is, of course, all subject to funding. I want to say this is not all going to happen on day one, but this is the framework that the bill lays out, is that with the proper funding from the legislature, we will be able to ensure that all families actually can afford, can get the subsidy that they need in order to be able to afford childcare. And the other piece of it is how much that subsidy would be. Under Common Start, any family who's making less than 50% of the state median income would pay no fee at all. And so just as an example, for a family of 3 right now, that's about $55,000 a year. They would not, if they got a subsidy, they would not have any parent fee associated with it at all. And then for parents who earned more than that, they would have only the income above that threshold considered in determining a parent fee that could be no more than 7% of the family's income. So it sets that limit. And the only people who would, be earning too much to participate is if 7% of their income was more than the cost of, was so much that it was more than the entire cost of care. So, but otherwise the framework that the bill lays out is to try to ensure that it really is available and affordable for all families.
So parents, do you have any comments or questions to what Naomi has just described?
I don't really have too much, but I guess I'll just jump in, Naomi, and saying I think what's good about the framework certainly is it's acknowledging that there's a spectrum. And again, I think it's cliche to kind of say that, or it's simplified, but I think the way you just laid it out recognizes families across the income spectrum are struggling or worried or cannot plan accordingly. And again, we all know as parents or expectant parents that planning is a huge part of your lives, whether you're working or not. And we just heard a powerful story, right, of how this just affects people's ability to stay in the workforce, especially women and others. And so I just think the thoughtfulness around ensuring it's certainly income eligible, but it's a spectrum and range here that is understandable and easy to digest is important for the entire Commonwealth to know. So thank you for outlining it for all of us.
Well, thank you. And I do think it's worth noting that, we recognize that the legislature may not be able to provide all of the funding at once. And this may be a system that has to get built up. And in fact, the bill anticipates it taking up to 5 years to fully implement the bill once it's passed. And so another thing that's built into it, while the vision is exactly what I've just laid out, that there would not be any income limit other than, that 7% of your income is more than the entire cost of care. While we're on our way to getting there, to ensuring that everybody's covered, the bill does also lay out tiers to ensure that we're covering the lowest income families first, that they don't get left behind. And then at each stage, expanding and expanding until we can get to the goal that we all agree is necessary.
Great. Thank you so much, Naomi. And thank you very much again to our speakers, to our parent speakers who are here to shed light on your very specific stories and how the Common Start bill in the future would be able to mitigate some of these challenges. So if you're wondering at this point, so what can I do? How can I help this bill move forward in the legislative process to become a reality? So we have a link for that. And we're going to show you what we're talking about here on the screen in just a second. So as advocates, your call to action is to sign your name to this open letter to the Massachusetts State Legislature in support of the Common Start bill. So we ask you to join us in urging the Joint Committee on Education to report this bill favorably out of committee. So this ask is to show legislators that many people all around Massachusetts support the Common Start solution to create system change. So I'll go ahead and just hang on for a second while everybody has an opportunity to grab that link out of the chat if you would like to be able to sign on. And again, I don't think I can reiterate how grateful we are that parents who are so busy with their evening routines with their children have taken time to be here this evening. And also, I would like to point out just how gracious you are in terms of being thankful for the early educators in your lives. So thank you. So I would like to just ask my helpers whether or not we have Assistant Speaker Katherine Clark here.
I'm here.
Fabulous. Thank you. So terrific to see you. I would like to be able to provide a proper introduction. So Congresswoman Katherine Clark proudly serves the 5th District of Massachusetts. She was first elected in a special election in December of 2013. Katherine's career in public service is driven by her commitment to helping children and families succeed. Thank you. She is a vocal advocate for ending wage discrimination, protecting women's health care, access to affordable, high-quality childcare, yes, paid family leave, safer schools, and other reforms to address the challenges women and families face. She believes that Congress must work to end the glaring disconnect between the needs of families at home and priorities in Washington. In Congress, she brings her experience as a state senator, state representative, general counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, and policy chief for the state attorney general. In fall 2020, she was elected by her colleagues to serve as assistant speaker of the 117th Congress after serving as the vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus during the previous session. Please welcome Assistant Speaker Katherine Clark.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that warm introduction. I'd also like to thank Deb Faustino and the Coalition for Social Justice and all of the community leaders and parents participating in this conversation, and for your work to build a more just Massachusetts. And tonight we're here to talk about a topic central to families, our economy, and our recovery, and that's early education and care. And we all know throughout this pandemic, but also long before, the Common Start Coalition has brought together organizations, providers, parents, early educators, and advocates across the state to work together to make high quality early education and care affordable and accessible to all Massachusetts families. Your dedication to ensuring that every child has a great start and every family has a fair shot is the same mission that drives my work in Washington. Over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago, I ran for school committee in Melrose because I wanted to secure full-day kindergarten for all families without tuition. And working full-time with 3 children of my own, I knew very well the importance of early ed for our kids and for parents. And while the campaign itself wasn't my most challenging, there were 8 candidates running for 9 open seats when I jumped in. To this day, it is one of the toughest jobs I've ever had. And today, more than ever, universal early education and preschool remains my goal. And we all know that in order to build stronger families and a stronger economy, we need access to high quality early childhood education. Even before the current crisis with this pandemic, our childcare system wasn't working. It didn't work for providers, for teachers, for parents, for kids, or for our economy. So just let's look at some facts. Parents struggle with impossibly high costs, especially parents in Massachusetts. Providers operate on the thinnest of margins. Meanwhile, early educators are often paid minimum wage salaries, and we have a widening gap of childcare availability. About 30% of families can't find care for their child. In 1 year alone, we lose nationally between $5 billion and $7.5 billion in our economic output from a lack of childcare. And when parents across the country can't find care, the economy loses. I'm sorry, those figures were for the Commonwealth. Across the country, it's a staggering $57 billion per year in lost earnings, productivity, and in revenue. And the truth is that in America, the care economy has been long undervalued and underinvested in. For far too long, our social safety net has been the low paid or unpaid work of women. And a recent study of wealthy nations showed that those countries contribute an average of $14,000 per year for a toddler's care, compared to just $500 in the US. America is an outlier, and our kids and families are paying the price. And when the pandemic came along and shook an already fragile system, it brought early education centers and the entire care economy to the brink of collapse. 40% of childcare centers were forced to close during the pandemic. In September, of the 194,000 jobs that were gained, every single one of them went to a man. Women lost 26,000 jobs. This is because of the care crisis. And further, the December unemployment report showed that while we have historically low unemployment, unemployment for women of color is increasing due to the continued challenges facing childcare and early education providers. But here's what gives me hope. The spotlight on this issue, the conversations like you are having tonight, have created a window of opportunity to fundamentally change the way we view and fund early education. Nationally, we're having a reckoning that childcare is not a private issue, but a public good. Earlier this year, Democrats in Congress passed the American Rescue Plan that included $40 billion to help states keep childcare and Head Start programs open, helping childcare providers stay afloat and parents to get back to work and businesses to thrive. From April of 2020 to March of 21, when the pandemic began to when the bill was signed, I've been advocating and pushing for childcare relief. And with so many of you as my partners and by my side, we have changed the conversation around childcare. As of today, Massachusetts has received $510 million in child care stabilization funding, and we are not done yet. This funding is going to provide monthly payments directly to providers to support day-to-day operational and workforce costs like personnel, rent, mortgage, utilities. And today, over 6,000 child care programs have submitted applications for this funding and are already benefiting for it. That is 81% of all eligible child care programs in the state. And we know that while the American Rescue Plan funding has been critical, it is not enough for the long-term improvements for our families and providers. And that's where our work needs to continue. We are still at the negotiating table, working to bring the transformative Build Back Better agenda to life. It's long past time that our laws recognize childcare is economic infrastructure, just as important as roads and bridges, expanding broadband, and upgrading our ports and airports. For years, we've been fighting for incremental gains in public childcare funding. But today we're having a different conversation. We have shifted the paradigm. Childcare's infrastructure is no longer a chant sung by a few. It is now the mantra of Congress and the White House, and it's guiding my work on Capitol Hill. At their core, the child care proposals in Build Back Better agenda are about putting families first. The president's agenda calls for life-changing investments, universal pre-K for all 3 and 4-year-olds. That is approximately 6 million children. And it would be the first expansion of our public school system in over 100 years. The bill would cut childcare costs for families earning up to 250% of their state's median income and raise the wages of providers and early educators, extend key tax cuts in the American Rescue Plan that benefit lower and middle income families. And this major investment in our economic recovery has shown us that the number one concern that I have heard from business leaders in Massachusetts is childcare. Employees can't reliably return to work without care for their kids and their aging loved ones. And again, this has been a long-term limitation on America's economic potential. But the Build Back Better agenda is also about our kids' future and equity within our education system. We know that when children are denied access to high quality early education and care, they miss out on the learning environment, structure, and stability that helps set them up for success in school and in the workforce, and hurts their long-term health and well-being. Ensuring that all children have access to high quality early ed is how we stop the achievement gap from widening and health disparities from worsening. We know our kids can't wait for action. Women can't wait, families can't wait, our economy can't wait. These are the long-term solutions we need, not to return to the status quo, but to truly create a more equitable and just society. I am encouraged by how far we've come and how many children and families' lives can be transformed by our work. And I know that together we can make affordable, quality childcare and early education a reality for every family in the Commonwealth. I am so grateful to have you all as partners and advocates, and also grateful, as was mentioned earlier, to all the parents on the call for taking time out. I know that we are just past the witching hour when you have young kids, and it's a hard time of evening to jump on another Zoom. But we appreciate you. I hope you consider me a partner in this work, and we truly are on the verge of doing great things for the future of our country and our children. Thanks so much, Anna.
Thank you very much, Assistant Speaker. So I don't know if you were on a little bit earlier, but I did want to mention that we did a little word cloud, and the word that folks are feeling right now is hopeful. because I wanted to share that with you, because even though everything is going on that is so distressing on a daily basis, folks are still hopeful. So we want to be able to share that with you.
Yeah, well, I always think of my friend, especially as we move into March and the anniversary of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. One of the great privileges of my life is being able to serve with John Lewis. And his last words to our caucus before his passing was, "Don't get weary." You know, we have huge challenges in this country. The fragility of our democracy has been exposed, but it's a fight worth staying in. And democracy is worth fighting for. Equality and justice, making all those ideals that we talk about come to life, are worth pursuing. So I hope you all energize each other and know that we are not giving up. We're not walking away. We're not going to get weary, and we're going to keep making good trouble, just like John Lewis taught us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. So that was terrific. Colin, would you like to expand a little bit as to how the assistant speaker's comments relate to Common Start?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it gives a good, it's, I'm coming to you from Watertown. So Congresswoman Clark is also my rep as well. And to know that our rep in DC is, on the cutting edge and the front line of this is, it's really encouraging and heartening. And she's met with families and parents to talk about this many times. And so what I'll say is it's going to be like, we know that the challenges are very significant, the things we want to do, making sure it's no more than 7% of people's income, making sure teachers are paid, making sure we're increasing capacity and getting people through and beyond COVID. So all those things are going to take funding, and we do have to have an answer for that. So, the Build Back Better or any new federal bill to do federal childcare expansion is going to be a huge deal. And so we have to understand that how critical that is. Now, I think that it's been, over the course of 2020 and last year, like, I wanted to not get ahead of myself and count money before it has actually passed Congress. So I also want to not get ahead of myself there. But I think it's important to remember, and I should say it's also bath and story time at my house. And I hear some side noise back here, but it's it's never been controversial as far as all the complex negotiations. The funding for childcare has always been something that seemingly has great support, but it's tied up in all these issues of kind of, how big should this bill be, and what do we need to do with certain senators who are reluctant to pass it, and how does that have to happen? And I know that can be very stressful and and dispiriting when that doesn't move as fast as we want it to move. But I think that I think we have to stay optimistic and hopeful that a package of infrastructure things that we didn't get done in the last infrastructure bill, the bipartisan one that was more like roads and bridges, there's still momentum for that. And it may be that we won't get everything we want, but it can still be significant. And the way that would probably look is it would be 5 or 6 years of extra federal funding. And that would be on top of what we've already got. So every dollar that we get in that type of funding will be one more dollar that we can account for where it's coming from, and it will make the cost for the state to do its part a little bit less. Now, it's not going to ever substitute entirely, and just about any expansion plan, Massachusetts as a state has to have a coherent plan for how it's going to expand care, which is why Common Start is so important, because we would be saying to the feds, especially if money was competitive and competitive grants, we'd say, look, we've got a plan right here, and it's got all these components. It's consistent with what the Biden administration and folks like Congresswoman Clark are saying. So that will put us in an advantageous position. And we do know that, federal money is going to be really important, but it's not going to be everything.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you for that commentary. Do we have any comments from any of our speakers? All right. Well, seeing none, we're going to proceed to the rest of our roundtable discussion. And so as we enter our discussions with our providers and educators, I did also want to comment that there are additional benefits in the Common Start bill, one of those including wraparound services, the possibility for extended hours. So perhaps we'll get into that part of the discussion as well. So we are going to go ahead and tee up Sally and Lauren. Sally and Lauren are each providers, and Sally, I'm hoping that we can start with you. And if you could please introduce yourself, tell us your story to help us understand the challenges that you're facing today, and possibly even compare that to what they were a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. You're muted.
Whoops, okay. Hi, my name is Sally Mavroides, and I am the director lead teacher at St. David's Nursery School, which is located in South Yarmouth. We are a small nonprofit that our church does as an outreach for the community. We have an infant toddler room, which is licensed for 9 children, and a preschool, which is licensed for 10 children. Many of our challenges come from our size and our mission, which is to provide childcare for low and middle class families who don't qualify for other forms of aid. Small fluctuations in enrollment can have a big impact on our financial stability because of our lower tuition rates and smaller numbers of children. One of my biggest challenges has been finding qualified teachers. This has always been a problem, but is much worse now than it was in 2019. Enrollment is down in the infant toddler room because even though I was getting calls every day from parents looking for childcare, I could not take more children until I hired another teacher, and I was not getting any responses to my ads looking for teachers. There are many provisions in this bill that I think will be beneficial for all childcare centers, but there are at least 2 that I think will really help my center. One is that the bedrock funding will be based on provider capacity and not attendance. In a small center, having one family move or 4 or 5 kids leaving for kindergarten really affects our financial status and can take a few weeks or longer to fix. So having the funding there would enable us to keep things going while we fill openings. Another provision is addressing economies of scale, such that smaller providers may have higher costs in some areas, necessitating proportionally higher funding. In conclusion, childcare has had many challenges for as long as I have been in the business, which is over 45 years. I am glad to help promote something that will help solve the issues instead of just talking about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. All right, Lauren, we have Lauren Cook from Ellis Early Learning. Could you please introduce yourself a little further and tell us about your story?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Cook, CEO of Ellis Early Learning in Boston, the organization that Shane and Elizabeth, the couple we heard from earlier, chose for their children, and I'm delighted to be here. I've been asked to describe Ellis's operating challenges, which I know are not unique. For those who may not know Ellis well, we are a good-sized organization. We have 22 early education classrooms spread over 3 sites. We have an operating budget of $6 million, and we need to fundraise a quarter of that to maintain our status quo of our teachers earning far less than they deserve and our families paying far more than is reasonable. 2/3 of Ellis families receive subsidies, and the remaining third pay full tuition. Every night, the Ellis leadership team goes to sleep with stress about what the morning will bring. Which teachers from our already skeleton crew will unexpectedly be absent? With 15 seemingly unfillable vacancies, any unexpected absence sends Ellis into a tailspin. The morning texts begin early, long before sunrise. This person is out, that person is out, who can cover? Lauren, who from admin can we put in classrooms to keep them open? Okay, we have a plan. Our director of finance will be at the front desk. Our front desk person will be in a classroom all day. Our VP of development will cover infant breaks. The few others left on the admin team will pitch in too, including me. Our admin team are not able to perform their necessary work functions, and our teachers have a much more difficult work experience than they ever have. Without stable teaching partners, our teachers who remain at Ellis are not only caring for and educating our children, but they're trying to bring whichever vaccinated adult is helping up to speed on an ongoing basis. And let's not forget, all of this is happening amidst a global pandemic with real fears about the current Omicron surge. This is only one example of the challenges we consistently face. This is not sustainable, and funding is the solution. The early education field is skating on thin ice, hanging on by a mere thread. If my peers would permit me to speak for them, we are hopeful, yes, but we are also exhausted and depleted. These last two words are not ones that should be associated with a field devoted to uplift, nurture, educate, and prepare our youngest learners for their very bright futures. To my provider peers out there, I want to say that you, along with our collective teachers, are among the strongest, most optimistic, and most resilient professionals serving the Commonwealth today. We have come this far, and we will get through this. And hopefully, Common Start will make all the difference.
Lauren, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments, and cheers to you. I hope everybody can, give a shout out, give a clap of hands. And it's unfortunate that we are in the Zoom atmosphere where you can't see it, you can't hear it. But thank you, Sally and Lauren, for essentially sharing what the community is feeling and experiencing. So Naomi, would you like to address some of the topics that were just brought up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Sally and Lauren for summing it up so beautifully. As Sally mentioned, one of the key things that the Common Start bill does is set up a system of bedrock funding for providers. So this is money to support providers to enable them to meet their costs and continue to operate, that is separate, that comes directly from the state and is separate from what they're collecting from parents. So the idea that's laid out in the bill is that through combination of this bedrock funding, of subsidies received per child for children who do have subsidies, and the affordable amounts that their parents are able to pay, that when you combine those different sources of funding, providers will receive the full cost of care. They will not be cutting corners the way that we know they're forced to do, despite it being, we've heard a lot of love for providers, and I share that love, but we know that they've been placed in an untenable situation of trying to make ends meet in an economic model that just doesn't really work. And so we think one of the really kind of exciting and innovative ideas behind the Common Start bill is providers need to be given the full cost of care. That is, of course, it's going to take funding to do that. In terms of what is the full cost of care, the bill lays out a long list of factors. We talked to a lot of providers in the process of drafting it, to understand what are the range of things that of their expenses. And so the bill lays out a list of things that need to be included in the Department of Early Education and Care developing determining how much is the full cost of care, as well as, in addition to the language that's in the bill, it lays out that there would be a public process, so that as after the bill passed and the Department of Early Education and Care was setting out to actually determine numbers, there'd be public hearings and public input so that they could really be sure they're getting all the information and getting it right. And that once they've determined those numbers, what do we really need to pay providers? That they would need to be given that much. And that includes, I know we're going to get on to the educators in a moment, but just as a preview, and it goes to what the providers, what Lauren was talking about not having, both Lauren and Sally were talking about being short of staff. One of the full costs of care is teacher salaries that are commensurate with public school educator salaries, right? That's the other prong of this that, we know is so essential. You cannot expect people to do these incredibly hard jobs and maintain the exceptional quality of care that so many of them do throughout Massachusetts without paying them. Those are the pieces of the bill that, as I said at the outset, we tried to bring together. How do we address the needs of parents and providers and educators all at once? And that's what the bill seeks to do.
Yeah. Well, and I also wanted to comment, Naomi, did you mention about capacity being the driver instead of attendance on that?
I didn't mention it, but I think Sally mentioned it.
Okay.
So
Okay,
yes, that the idea is, right, part of the full cost of care, I think it sort of goes, the idea that the full cost of care can't be determined just by how many kids showed up in your class that day, right? There's all kinds of overhead that's involved in running a program that go towards the full cost of care. And so that's why you need to pay for capacity and not just for the number of kids who you happen to have in, on a given day.
Thank you, Naomi. So Sally or Lauren, would you like to have any other discussion, any comments to what Naomi just said?
It's very clear how important Common Start is.
Thank you again for sharing your stories and for being supporters of Common Start. So we have with us two fabulous early educators, and we have Trish and Roz who are with us, and Trish has been a rally volunteer before, as noted by her t-shirt. So thank you very much for wearing it. And so I wanted to go ahead and ask if Trish, you could please introduce yourself and share your story and talk with us about what you think needs to change for educators to not only stay in the field, but then also as the field looks to bring more people in to the field.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patricia Nadeau. I have worked in this field 20 plus years. I currently work at Pace Head Start. For 17 years, I was doing preschool with Pace Head Start. I just recently switched into the infant and toddler room. I can tell you everything that all these prior people have spoke about. The parents, I've been there, single parent, struggle to pay for childcare, only one income. I got my bachelor's degree and that didn't make it any easier. I could speak to you about what the Congresswoman was talking about, how, the economic benefit of was Head Start child when I was 3 and 4 years old. So graduated, I've gotten a degree. Mine's currently getting her higher education, so I can address that as well. But right now, we're in the hat of an educator, and we're exhausted. Just like the provider said, you wake up every morning and you don't know who's going to be out sick. You don't know what you're walking into. We have children that we work with that are basically living in trauma. So you're going in and you're providing not only a safe place, but you're trying to help children express their emotions.
Trish, we can't hear you. Something happened.
parents, it gets higher and higher, the expectations of us. We go, we do the trainings, we do the education, we get our degrees, and we're still not getting paid compared to somebody that works in a public school. This sentiment is not the same with sometimes you're like, I'm an educator, and sometimes people like, but you work with babies, you work with toddlers, you work with preschoolers, you're just playing all day. Yes, we play, but we do so much more. We wear so many hats. And we're not here because we want more money. That's not what this is about. We all go into this field because we're passionate about what we do. We care about these children a lot of times as they're our own children, their extended family members. And all we ask is that you guys support us because we're burnt out. And to get people in the field, you got to offer them more than the Walmart, the Dunkin' Donuts is offering. It's too much. You have to be able to take care of your own family. And if you can't take care of your family in this field, you got to do what's best for you. And you have to find where the money is. So I would like people to really just think about that we're not here because we don't have a passion for it. We love this job. I chose this job. I could have done something else when I went to college. I even had teachers saying, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I've always wanted to work with young children. I always wanted to give them experience that I got when I went to Head Start. So thank you for listening to my story, and have a good evening.
Trish, thank you so much. I know that you cut out just a little bit in there, but we certainly got the understanding of what you're saying, and thank you so much for sharing that passionate plea with everybody. Okay, Roz Mann is with us this evening. And Roz, if you could please introduce yourself and share your story and talk about what you think needs to change for educators to stay in the field and enter the field.
Hi, everybody. I'm Roz Mann. I am an educator, a former provider of a program that unfortunately was one of Collins' 11% that had to close during COVID. And I presently am an adjunct at Bunker Hill Community College teaching early childhood courses to the future of the field, I hope. Everyone has mentioned compensation. Excuse me. We know that's number one, that we need to pay the people in the front lines their due. The other thing I hear a lot from people is from teachers, especially, is they like the field to have greater respect, that they'd like to be recognized as being professionals, just like everybody does with the K-12 system.
Roz, could you just speak up a little bit?
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's better, thank you.
So they would like to be able to feel as if and know that what they're doing is important and the public respects that. They also tell me a lot of times they feel overburdened because they don't have any support systems to help them with children in the classroom who need those extra supports. And it should be on site, not having to wait for the public schools to evaluate and go through all kinds of hoops before a child can get some kind of service. They also would like more time. They don't get enough planning time. They don't get enough collaboration time with not only their peers, but with families, because everything is so compressed and they're used in multiple ways within their program. They're either covering breaks if they can be free. They're running to cover another classroom. They're combining classrooms. They're just so overwhelmed with all of this. They don't feel as if the work they're doing is really understood and valued, not only by parents, but by their peers as well in some cases. So I think that Common Start will help to expand the role of EEC and give them the opportunity to think bigger and broader and allow these programs to maybe look at different business models and how they can make all the educators work and not feel overwhelmed.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Roz, for sharing those thoughts, given your experiences as a provider, educator. So Naomi, what would you like to comment or respond?
Well, one thing that I think we haven't mentioned yet that's in the bill is it would require EEC to set up a professional development grant program that would be available to individuals, to educators, either individuals wanting to go into the field or educators who are already in the field seeking further training. Because we certainly have heard about how difficult it is to feel like you have a career path that you can follow. And as I was saying earlier, then for when folks are in the field, the idea is that they will be compensated commensurate with public school educators. And, we cannot legislate respect, unfortunately, but we can legislate the context, right? And if folks see that, our hope is that if the world sees the system for full access and full staffing and full compensation that we're envisioning, that Common Start envisions in this bill, that the importance of educators will start to be better recognized. I also just wanted to note that when we talk about this compensation, how are we going to make that happen? It's written into the bill that for any provider that wants to get the bedrock funding that we talked about, which is to meet the full costs of that provider, they, as a condition, to the extent that they're funded for it, obviously the funding has to get ramped up, but as a condition of accepting that bedrock funding, they need to then use it for salaries so that educators actually have, what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Roz?
And it's more than just the salary, it's the benefits that go along with it, so that gives them a full picture of security.
Yes, and the bill specifically instructs EEC to produce guidelines. The way it's laid out, the commensurate salaries with public schools are actually mandated, and the range of benefits is guidelines because we couldn't maintain one specific, there's too much variation for us to say what it was we're mandating, but that they do have to provide guidance on what is expected of providers to ensure that educators actually have benefits. So thank you for mentioning that point as well.
Yes.
And I see a question in the chat about private facilities. So I think it's worth emphasizing that the Common Start legislation in no way changes the existing mixed delivery system that we have for childcare in Massachusetts, meaning that EEC, we have licensed and license exempt providers who are nonprofits, who operate out of in the public sector, in the private sector, who are small businesses, who are family providers. Those all exist now, and they would all continue to exist and have the opportunity to participate in getting this bedrock funding in the framework laid out by the legislation.
Do we have any questions from any of our other speakers in addition to Roz and Trish? All right, well, Naomi, thank you very much for your responses. And Roz, Trish, thank you so much. You are the fabulous sheroes every single day. And so again, same thing, lots of applause from everybody here for being able to share your story with us. So grateful, so grateful. So thank you again. So we're going to start to wrap things up. And I wanted to share something that some of you have probably seen. It is the Common Start infographic. And this is really just a simple one pager. You can find it on our website. And it really goes to show that the Common Start vision of being able to provide quality, affordable early education and childcare for families benefits so many different people, organizations, the community. It just benefits absolutely everybody. So I want to leave this up for a minute while I chat about my final comments. So if we want things to change, to be better, then the system has to change. And that will happen via the Common Start legislation. But again, we have to do this together. One of my favorite books is the Harry Potter series. And I love Dumbledore, who said, "We are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided." So no part of the field can do this alone. We all have to do it together. If you're not part of the coalition yet, please sign up. The link is in the chat. And if you'd like to sign your name to this open letter to the Massachusetts State Legislature in support of the Common Start bill, please click on the link in the chat as well. All of us are needed to advance this bill. So please get involved with us, share invitations to future events. We will likely have more of these different types of forums with different topics that focus on Common Start from a different perspective, but again, show the breadth and depth of our coalition members. For example, perhaps something on workforce solutions, racial justice. So please stay tuned. I would like to thank each of our speakers for being here this evening with us, and to be able to also thank our interpretation team, as well as everyone who is in the audience who was able to attend tonight, current and future members of the Common Start Coalition, and also folks from the Coalition for Social Justice. So what I'd like to say is for folks who would like to stay on for another minute or so to chat with your colleagues who you haven't seen in a while, we'll keep the chat open till 8:05. And before I officially turn it over, are there any final questions, final comments from anyone? No? Okay. Well, we're going to queue up the Common Start anthem one more time. And again, my sincere thanks to every one of our speakers this evening.